So a lot happened today. Today was probably one of the most geopolitically dense and intense days that the world has witnessed for a very long time. And this includes myself and a lot of people, is that it's been profoundly confusing, the amount of information that has been coming out, and it's very hard to get your head around it. So I'm going to try my absolute best to put into concise and simple terms what exactly happened today, one of the busiest days in geopolitics in decades. So the first thing that I woke up to, being a very different time zone over here, was the fact that Iran had rolled out what its retaliation was for the US strikes on its nuclear facilities. And the news that I woke up to was that Iran had launched strikes on an American military base in Qatar. And as strange as it might sound, that was actually a de-escalation. Iran picked the least provocative option it had to save face and actually respond to what the United States had done. And when I say that, I have to give you the context. What Iran did was it told both Qatar and the United States that it was going to target this military base specifically, essentially giving them a heads up to say, you can move all your men and all your equipment out of there, but we have to do something to save face. As far as we are aware, no Americans died in the strikes, and this essentially gives the Iranians a big domestic propaganda win. They can go back to their people through state media and say that in response for these horrible attacks on our country, we have blown up an American military base. And the United States is satisfied because Iran is satisfied. And hopefully, from the American perspective, just a bunch of equipment and some facilities were damaged, and Iran is satisfied and won't escalate any further. So at least from my perspective, when I woke up, it seemed that the day was beginning with de-escalation. Iran had been given this target to hit, which gave it a domestic win, which let it save face with its population, and America got a seemingly complacent Iran getting what they want, and they didn't lose any people in Iran's retaliation. But the day really escalated specifically between Israel and Iran in terms of their strikes on each other. Because after the bombing of the US base, Trump then declared that there would be a ceasefire, that both the Iranians and the Israelis had agreed to some secession in conflict, and that this would be the end of the war. It would go down as the 12-day war, as he decided to name it, and that there would be no more violence. But that led to a lot of confusion, because apparently neither the Israelis or the Iranians had actually pre-agreed to that, at least according to some statements from government officials. The Iranians themselves explicitly said that there had not been an offer of a ceasefire made to them, and it's very confusing here because the waters are murky at this point, but it seems like there is a non-zero chance that Trump just declared there will be a ceasefire to the public and then just waited to see how both sides would react. So we were a bit confused for a while, but it seems that after a couple hours, the Israelis did come around and did confirm, yes, they would agree with Trump's ceasefire and not continue the war beyond a certain point in the day. And then after a lot of confusion on the Iranian side, it seemed that they did in fact agree to it after they repackaged it and sold it to their people as, oh, the Israelis and the Americans came to us and begged us for a ceasefire, and we so graciously accepted the offer. But between the time at which both parties acknowledged they would respect the ceasefire and when it would actually come into effect, there was quite a bit of tit-for-tat strikes between the Israelis and the Iranians. And probably the incident you're going to hear the most about is that an Iranian missile hit an Israeli bomb shelter in the country's south directly, killing 4 Israelis and injuring 20. We currently don't have any as well verified reports about casualties on the Iranian side, but from what we understand, the Iranian government has also confirmed today that over the totality of this back and forth conflict, that I believe 600 Iranians at least have been killed in Israeli strikes. So after all that damage, all that loss of life, all that tragedy, a ceasefire was now finally taking effect. But the people of both countries didn't even have time to take a breath before apparently the ceasefire was violated, but in a profoundly confusing way that only added to how lost everybody feels trying to understand this situation. According to Israel, and more specifically the IDF, after the ceasefire had taken effect, the Iranians launched a strike on Israel, which was intercepted and stopped, and then you just broadly saw the Israeli government saying that the ceasefire has been violated and we will now launch a massive response against Iran. You very quickly had the Israeli defense minister and the Israeli finance minister coming out and making their bombastic statements about making Tehran pay for violating the ceasefire, that there would be a massive Israeli response. But, interestingly, the Iranians outright denied that they had launched anything against Israel. And that's very weird for the Iranians. That is not typical. Normally, if they are attacking Israel in any capacity, they are doing so partially because they know it is a domestic win for them in their propaganda. They can say to their people, we have attacked the state of Israel, which we hate. But they haven't taken the blame for it, which leads a couple of options on the table for what has happened. I mean, first of all, they did it, and they are just testing the ceasefire to see what happens, which isn't unheard of. Occasionally, just like, I think Hezbollah did something similar when there was a ceasefire between them and Israel. They launched a shell into Israel just to see how the Israelis would respond, to try and get a sense for where they were, and they responded very heavily, so Hezbollah stopped doing that. There's also the possibility that this was some third actor, maybe trying to instigate more violence between these two countries, but that's particularly unlikely. And then there are some people proposing, oh, maybe this is a false flag operation by the Israelis, which we have no proof for whatsoever as of yet. So everyone is very confused at the moment as to what is actually happening. Did Iran violate the ceasefire or didn't they? Is Israel about to respond in a massively disproportionate way against the Iranians? Well, I think one person that is probably more frustrated than anyone else in this situation is Trump himself, because what he's just said to the press and in his statements and what he's posting is, even for him, kind of unbelievable. So the first really interesting thing was this Truth Social post where he was basically saying, Israel, do not bomb Iran at this point. Bring the pilots back. Under no circumstance do you hit Iran. Trump then spoke to some reporters before he boarded a helicopter, and you got the sense that he was really running out of patience. He said that he believed that both sides had violated the ceasefire, but he had some very harsh words for the Israelis. He said that apparently he has to go and make sure that the Israelis calm down, and that it was unbelievable how many bombs that the Israelis were dropping right after Trump had announced that the ceasefire was going to take place. And then, well, to really show you how fed up he is, he then said, we're talking about two countries that have been fighting for so long, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Which is crazy to hear from an American president. Because this is Trump's moment. This is what he wants. He wants this, I'm certain that he does a Nobel Peace Prize out of this. He wants the recognition, the reputation, and the legacy of ending this war. But according to him, the ceasefire that he has put in place already has been or is about to be violated by both sides of this conflict, which is a major embarrassment for him. And I think, looking at how frustrated Trump is at the moment, this highlights a particularly concerning pattern that Trump has when it comes to diplomacy. And this was brought up on I believe, The Rest is Politics podcast. Rory Stewart, I believe, brought this up. Great podcast. You should check it out. And it's this habit that Trump has, which really hurts any attempts of his at diplomacy, which is that he gets really bored really fast with practically everything. We saw this with the minerals deal that he was going for in Ukraine to try and secure an end to the conflict there. But when that didn't pan out after a couple of weeks, he kind of just stepped away from the whole thing, and the conflict over there is protracted now with seemingly no real progress towards peace, at least not via the United States leadership. He kind of just stepped away from it, and I get the sense he is really quickly running out of patience with this conflict in particular. Because this was the big win for him, or it could have been. He goes in, he bombs America's favorite enemy, favorite punching bag in the Middle East, the Iranians, and then he gets a win. He gets to get out, make a ceasefire, and then get declared a peacemaker. And he doesn't fall into the trap that George W. Bush did with Iraq. He goes in quick, in and out, 20-minute adventure. But it seems that he's running into the fact that neither the Iranians or the Israelis actually want to stop fighting each other. We live in such fascinating and stupid times. it's incredible to me that like this ceasefire in the Middle East is like hanging by a thread, and that thread is the attention span of an 80-year-old Donald Trump. And I got to be honest, I don't know how long that's going to hold.